Hey Simone.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, very well. Very early morning start for you.
Early morning start. I haven't even been to bed yet. I tried to have the nap this afternoon. It didn't quite take.
Do you realise, Simone, that you are actually the first person in the Oceania part of TFT12 who actually has an Antipodean accent?
Oh, really? Let me think. Actually, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
It's yes, it's a very cold, dark, wet, and windy evening out there.
Yeah. For those of you who don't realise, Simone, although she is normally resident in Australia, is joining us from France, where she is having a creative sojourn.
It has been very creative, especially with the wine.
Yeah. For some reason, she decided to dump an Australian summer and head to a European winter.
Yes, it is rather cold, but I do have a rather toasty fire going.
Very good. Well, Simone, perhaps do you want to share a little bit with our audience about who you are and what you're bringing to us today?
Well, pretty quickly, because most of my stuff is on my bio anyway. I'm currently the Director for Business Development and Training at HDAA. But I didn't actually start out in IT. In fact, it was very much service roles. So originally I was a soldier and went off into other customer service things after I left there. Sales, I used to sell real estate and for business and those sorts of things, serviced offices, and a HR practitioner as well. So I've done lots of training and development work, lots of HR type stuff. Very much the topics I've enjoyed so far because they've been so much about the people aspect and about the business aspect, very much. Hence why I really like my topic that's coming up.
Yep. No, well, I mean, you're right. We have seen a lot of people focus today, which is fantastic. I mean, that's what we're here for. What are our services for if they're not for people? And you know, too often we actually forget the reason that we're here and look at the technology and the frameworks and concentrate on those. So
Well, we're definitely in a new era. I mean, here I am. I can sleep in the morning where some people can't, simply because of the virtue of the technology that we've got today. I can work at whatever hours are, I guess, suitable to the purpose.
great. Well, I'm going to focus the screen on you, Simone, and hand
Mhm.
over control to you, and we will look forward to your presentation on murders and acquisitions.
Wonderful. I'm just going to switch over to my slide presentation there. Very exciting to be part of this whole TFT12. The opportunity of seeing so many speakers has been fabulous for my own learning. I find that as managers we don't always get that opportunity. It's been mentioned before that we don't always have that training that we need, and especially to be able to do it from the comfort of your office or your lounge room at home. But even better because the topics have actually been chosen by practitioners out in the field. And so thank you very much for those of you that chose this, because it is one close to my heart, not just because of the traumas I've experienced, but definitely in terms of being able to help others. So I really hope you find the content enjoyable and useful. Murders and acquisitions, but the subtitle leading through transition is important. We've all been through transitions, whether it's an IT rollout or changing houses or our car. They're all a transition of some kind. But with mergers, acquisitions, and internal restructures, it brings about a heightened level of emotion. And as managers and leaders, or even just as part of the team, we actually have to deal with that emotional fallout that happens. So just a quick snapshot then of what we'll go over. The money is a big component, but here it's purely to demonstrate the enormity of it. It's really the complexity that tangles us up in that storm that's not always of our making. And transitioning those emotional drivers is very key to the success of having these come off the right way. The lessons learned are not just from my own experience. I know Kaz has already mentioned the Back to ITSM group, and I did throw some questions out to them and got some great insight back from them. My experiences did lead me, however, to actually write a short story that I think you will have a little bit of fun with. And also I do have additional resource slides that people can review at their own leisure. So let's have a little look then at what I meant by enormity. Just in 2011 alone, and this actually comes from the Institute of Mergers and Acquisitions, there was 40,000 announced M&As worldwide, and the value of 3,000 billion US really staggers my mind. 3,000 is a lot for me, let alone the billions. Certainly gives you an understanding of, you know, the motivation, I guess, that can be there for why some of these murders actually happen. Now, of that 40,000, IT consulting and services only had 1,500 announced transactions. Now, $70 billion US is still nothing to sniff at, but it's still only a smidgen over 2% of the worldwide figure. When you think, though, and as Charles has just pointed out in his presentation, how integrated IT is with the business, the impact on that 40,000 is certainly far greater than what these graphs actually show. I mean, it's usually the network support or security manager that knows about what's happening before many others do, and you can imagine the impact that that could have on the stock market if it got out. So to the wacky world of M&As, as I like to call it, it's actually not very surprising that people react so negatively about a murder when you see the type of vocab that's actually used by the M&A industry. I sure don't like to be sandbagged or raided or faced with a Saturday night special. Well, the Saturday night special just depends on whether I'm with my mates or not. But you still have to be wary of those poison pills in your morning coffee that could be lurking there. I mean, it's enough to give anyone acquisition indigestion, most definitely. So why do they actually occur? Well, none of the bullet points on there are really going to surprise you. The core of the why is actually very simple. Out there is something that you need, so you hunt down the guy who has it, and if he won't give it up, you raid his house or you kill him for it. It is just purely the target and the hunter. So the why is pretty simple, but the complexity is where we start to have a bit more fun with it. It is full of legal and financial wrangling, and it's this aspect that's already very well understood to be complex, especially if it's going to involve a different law or tax system to your own. But in my experience, and as others have already said, they oversimplify the people risks. Now, those risks are made up all the more complex by the emotional angst that superimposes those straight facts. Most senior or even line managers don't have the skill sets for dealing with this aspect. So what are the critical success factors then that we need? Now, Breed Lewis has already eloquently outlined in her talent management presentation earlier the need to retain key talent. And it's the talent that sets us apart and makes our organisations unique. And in terms of aligning the leadership, well, it's not just having the leadership at the same organisation, but even the same department actually together. When you mix up those organisations, you will have duplication of roles in many cases, and there is going to be a lot of bandying for leadership. So we really do have to try and align that in some way. Now, getting the right mix of skills and competencies, this is something I call imagine going to work naked, because that's how it feels when knowledge is lacking. So if you don't have the right skills and competencies, you will be left exposed to your people, to your customers, and even to your seniors. Transitions are the most intense work people are going to do, and you're almost certainly going to work yourself and your people harder than you anticipate. So you need to understand and know how to plan for these critical success factors. Now, not paying attention to these areas can actually lessen your success of a good merger or acquisition or restructure by 50%. Make the most of the people who have tolerance, clear judgment, open minds, and an ability to solve problems, and generally people that are fun and interesting. Don't discount the types of personalities that are really going to bring this change forward. And once you find them, you need to align them to you and reward and recognise them beyond their expectations, because it's a really tough ask going through this type of thing. Now, there's lots of scary things that can happen to your job, and here's just a few of them, and you'll recognise a lot of them. But the top two, mergers, acquisitions and restructures. During any of these, you'll sometimes find that you might actually be forced out of the game, or find that you're dragging your feet to work every day. So my question to you then is, what are you planning to do about it? You can do the do nothing, or is it really time to explore new possibilities in your career? It's something you should honestly think about. I want to thank Karen Ferris for the use of her slide here of the change curve. Many of you will already recognise this. For a deeper analysis of it, make sure you do review her presentation. My simple use of this is just the awareness that everybody responds to change differently and will adopt it at different speeds. It's really a roller coaster ride of emotions, and it's actually the emotions that lead to the behaviours that you'll see happen. Now remember, you're also going through the cycle of this change. You're still an individual, you're still an employee, and you're still human, I would hope. And so you may find yourself out of sync with your staff just as much as they'll find themselves out of sync with each other. Now, there is a natural behaviour rhythm that it goes along with the life cycle of this type of transition project. So it is important to understand the when and the how it can be undermined by these disruptive behaviours and emotions, especially if the people you're counting on to help you plan and execute the integration. Now, these behaviours can really hold an organisation hostage. It's not that we really want to ask you to become psychologists, but a little Psych 101 is certainly not going to lead you astray here. And if you find that you don't have the skill sets, then please ensure that you've actually got the people around you and the assistance that you need to help you understand and work your way through this. Now, fortunately, there's lots of actions that can help mitigate the low points and also reinforce the high points. Leading through and supporting your people who make up the integration team, enabling them to actually plan and execute a smooth transition. That's what you're trying to help them do. As Charles mentioned, there's no such thing as organisational transformation. It's actually personal transformation multiplied across the organisation. In terms of leading through the transition, how you actually choose to communicate is going to be really key. Now, leaders do fail to prioritise this. If communicating the vision and strategic rationale is so imperative, it really surprises me as to why they don't focus on this more than they do. But what has been discovered is they fail to do this, A, because it's not a legal requirement. Now, if I had my way, there'd be a lot more, I guess, ticks in the boxes around this so that they were actually forced to present a communication plan, have KPIs around it, and actually show it in action and happening, and that they would be measured on the success of how well it was communicated and understood. I mean, at the best of times, leaders can be reluctant communicators, especially during these times when you've got intensive time pressures. They're very quick to find reasons to allow the internal comms to slide. Executives can be even worse. Typically, they don't have the answers to the questions about people's futures and things like that. I mean, in essence, it's really a failure by management, and they end up being the ones purely by going through these behaviours holding the organisation hostage from being successful in making the transition. Now, the other thing too that's really important is your commitment. It doesn't make it any easier that until announcements are made, there can be lots of rumour-filled dread. And this fills the halls as everyone sees this, bunch of unknown suits march through, consultants, attorneys, G-men even. And of course, all these secret meetings that are being held by upper management. Basically, the impact of them seeing this without communication is really simple. Be afraid, be very afraid. Now, at this point, if you're part of the leadership through this, this is when you need to make them feel secure enough to ask the questions, clarify everything, and suspend that panic that's going on within them. You've got to encourage reflective rather than confrontational conversation and keep the comms channels open. You need to attend to the psychological dimensions of the change process. Now, early involvement. I want you to think about any NASA launch. If it helps you, think of the Apollo 13 movie. There's a flight controller. Perhaps the flight controller role is yours in this situation. And there's a host of terminals and people that are focused on their area of responsibility, be it the astronauts' medical standpoint, fuel gauges, navigation alignments, and all the rest of it. Now, nearing the go live for the launch, the flight controller asks each and every one of them a very simple question: go or no go? Now, flight can't know and see everything, so he's relying on his people's expertise. Now, if you involve your people early, you encourage that positive participation and you can gain from their functional view and their expertise. And then they come along for the ride. They feel a part of the whole thing and making it a success. Now, communication has the power to drive the realisation of integration goals. So there is a list of guiding principles that I have here for you. And you can review those at your leisure. But a couple of key things. First of all, what is your core message set going to be? There's never a single message because you've got multiple people going through this in different ways, and you need to present the messages in different ways. But that includes what's the strategic rationale for it, the whole why. Why should we become this new company? How is that going to make a difference to us? And then once you've defined what that is, stick to it. If you start going off track, all of a sudden you're going to develop that confusion and then frustration and anger and angst again. And as a leader, you need to be visible and highly visible. You can't just be sitting in meetings and hiding in your office. You still need to maintain that, one of my biggest beliefs, MBWA, management by walking around. Explain the line of sight between the merger goals and what the employees can do to help. That's what, be able to explain what that, all of that is. And of course, managing their expectations. But you cannot do that, as Charles pointed out as well, and Karen, without the trust and credibility in open, honest communication. But one of the other traps that people fall into when they define their message set is painting too rosy a picture of the integration process. It's hard, it's difficult, it's all sorts of emotions are going to get in the way. And if you paint too rosy a picture, it just ends up creating the obstacles. So face the difficult issues head on. Know how you're actually going to answer the questions. Ensure you've got your two-way communication mechanisms, all right? Forget your emails, forget your company posts on your website. This is upfront two-way. Whether that's face-to-face, you have your Twitter feed open, those sorts of things, but you must have two-way. And creating a positive sense of urgency. If anyone else has ever been through this, you know the time pressures are enormous and everything has to happen very fast. So it has to be a positive move forward. So very important to identify those quick wins and celebrate them and recognize those who have helped, especially. Karen mentioned before, when you recognize people for being part of the change and positively so, other people go, oh, well, they were rewarded for that, so maybe I should go along for the ride and stop, being a barrier, if you like, to the whole thing. Now, it's pretty interesting. The movie was called Margin Call, and it was actually released in 2011. So if you get the opportunity, do see the whole thing, but use it as a real learning tool for yourself through these kinds of situations. Watch the expressions on people's faces, listen to the tones in their voices, and see if you can actually plot them against Karen's change curve. That would be a really interesting exercise. Now, something else that Karen mentioned was the way in different models and things. I really like DARE, Discover, Assemble, Realise and Embed, but the ADCAR model might be familiar to some of you, but I've always found it particularly useful. But it's never just one model alone. Not every model works for every change, but it's a start. It is part of your communication strategy to look at how you're going to embed sustained change. And that means awareness of the need to change. You need to make sure that you've got that message set, as I said, and people understand what it's all about. And then as you're doing that, the mechanisms you use, the types of vocab you might use, those sorts of things, you start also building the desire to participate, your rewards and recognition, understanding how their roles are going to play out in all of this, and then give them the knowledge of how to change, what the change is going to look like. Now, because we're moving into a new world, some of their skill sets may not be relevant anymore, and they're going to have to take on new ones. But in addition to that, a lot of people don't have the skill sets to know how to handle this kind of change. So you have to give them the ability to implement the change on a day-to-day basis. And finally, reinforcement. Now, I mentioned before, not everyone goes through that change curve at the same speed or even to the same depths of emotion and behaviours. So you have to keep doing this until the new becomes normal again for everyone. Some of you might recognise what's been said here. It would be fantastic if you would actually share your responses to the types of models and things that you also use, especially in the Back to ITSM group on Facebook. I also highly recommend Karen's book on balanced diversity, because this is just a model, but in there, as you would have seen, you have all these practical approaches that are going to help you implement these models and work your way through them. Now, to the experiences and the lessons learned. As I mentioned, I sent this out to the group, and here's some of the things that came back. Now, I'm just going to draw on a couple of the points here. It can really feel as if the company is just buying body count. So don't undersell yourself. Now, this is both for your people and for yourself. There's clues here of how you can build your message sets. If you want to be retained, then you need to behave that way and participate positively. Maintain your personal professional standards. These are actually the people I look for, and anyone that gets noticed for the wrong reasons very quickly finds themselves on the hit list. Acknowledging emotions is really important because it validates the individual. It's okay to be angry and scared and confused, but now you have to put things in place to guide them through it. You need to be with them, not just for them. And in terms of the personal growth, well, that's going to be different for everyone. But the key thing here is you've really got to manage your own emotions and behaviour too. They're certainly going to shut down or freak out if they sense any fear or negativity in you. And one of the worst paths that you can take is the whole us versus them talk, the negativity, the gossip, etc. When you do that, you're actually demonstrating to them that it's okay to behave that way. So again, maintain and demonstrate your own personal and professional standards when it comes to this. So to a couple of my own short experiences. In the first case, this happened while I was in the Defence Force as a soldier. Department of Defence decided to amalgamate a specific job function in all three services. Now, the first we knew about it, we had Navy and RAF invading our Army territory and showing up on our Army course. Now, all three services have separate cultures, so there really was a bit of a clash. But the overarching business objective is exactly the same. They just have a different focus, one by land, sea and air. But for all that, they still banded together if outsiders tried to step in. Now, the job that they were looking to try and amalgamate was exactly the same, so they created the Joint Telecommunications School. Now, key lessons I learnt from that, it had a profound effect on my professional life because it opened up a wider set of opportunities, of places I could go, bases I could be on, because no longer was it only Army that I could be at. it also had a very profound effect on my personal life, because without the amalgamation, I certainly wouldn't have met my Navy husband. Now, the second case, this organisation was geographically split across a wide area. Now, everyone wanted to move into one building with the rest of the organisation. Now, there's normal difficulties that come across when you move to a new building. And in fact, what happened for our help desk is the outsourced IT consultancy ballsed it up, and the help desk was without computers for a whole week. So I was also then tasked to centralise the state service desks. The parameter was to provide the business case for whether they should go to Melbourne or Sydney. Now, on showing my boss the report and the recommendations, he was a bit surprised at first and raised his eyebrows at me. See, he actually knew about my personal circumstances, which meant I couldn't move to Melbourne, so he was expecting me to choose Sydney. But then he realised too, when he looked back over the previous years I had spent there, that achieving the objective was the thing I was focused on, and that was best met by Melbourne. The lesson I learnt from that is don't be afraid to make yourself redundant. It's personal and professional standard again, but I have to tell you that in making yourself redundant, yes, it opens up other opportunities, but when it actually comes to talking to as a candidate and they will know, well, why did you leave the other organisation? You turn around and say, well, I made myself redundant. It certainly opens the world up for them as well, and they start getting an insight that you're very focused on mission as opposed to just looking for another job because you don't like where you were. The final case is where this whole creation of murders and acquisitions came about. During a 2-year period, this organisation was acquired, merged and disbanded 3 times, and by separate competitor organisations. I had 6 different bosses during that period and felt well on my way to just wanting to walk out that door. Besides having to maintain BAU, I was called on to provide the HR advice to the fellow managers because the HR people that we had weren't there, or every organisation was different, and so the managers just kept coming to me, which makes it really difficult when you're trying to manage your own staff, let alone them and their staff. Part of it was also to do the due diligence on the skill sets, processes, locations, etc., and develop the integration plans for service and support 3 times. You can probably hear, even now, I still feel those stresses forming in me. It was a very difficult time. As a manager, you're an employee too, so you have the same fears, doubts and issues as anyone else. You also know about your staff, who's just taken out a mortgage, fallen pregnant, planning a wedding, studying manically at uni, and here you are about to dump this extra strain on them. It really kept me up at night, and it led me to writing into the wee hours of the morning to get really clear in my head what I was going to say to them. So this comes back to defining what is your core message set going to be. I really struggled in trying to figure out how was I going to lead my people through a really convoluted political minefield that this particular place was. It really was just a few scribbled notes that I would use at a meeting, and it turned into a story. It was published back in 2002, and earlier this year I actually revived it as an Ignite presentation. So I'm now going to share that Ignite with you, and hopefully you'll realise that when it comes to this type of thing that you're not alone, and perhaps give you some ideas on ways of defining how you're going to talk about things. Murder most foul. The detective was close to discovering the culprit's MO, dozens of bodies left as a warning. This dastardly pattern showed no signs of abating, and it was left to the detective to order the debris of emotional angst. He was in a quandary of what to say or do. His only option was to order the facts into a semblance of perspective and calm the masses. What choice to us in this predicament until the culprit is brought to bay? If you've ever experienced this type of murder, been the detective, or even held the weapon yourself, then this story is for you. How many murders have you let be committed by turning a blind eye or withholding evidence? It was a dark and stormy night, and in the dimly lit boardroom of ex-con, the directors watched their chairman gazing out the floor-to-ceiling window. The room was filled with secret anticipation, the secret joy of committing the easiest and most unpunished of crimes. Chairman X let his eyes fall over the roiling waters of the harbour, whipped by winds. He thought the rains will come soon, and with them the washing away of the blood. He turned as another bolt of lightning struck to see the lit faces upon him, glowing with excitement and urgency to complete the task. Their faces reflected what he once felt. Swallowing a bitter pill and the last of his whiskey, he looked at the paper in front of him, cleanly typed but not cleanly written. Was he truly aware of the lightning strike his hand was making? X signed it strong and steadily. There was no choice to turn back. Meanwhile, cooking the kids' dinner, just living their lives, employees of this giant are unaware that the ex-con board had just signed their death warrant. And the sun rose the next morning as it always does. You grab your cuppa, log on, get your email. Oh, look, usual number of auto reports, messages for the week. Oh, and the payroll guy finally fixed that problem for you. Company announcement. Too late. The reaper of shattered dreams has entered. Shock, disbelief, and the ogre of discontent wells up inside, feeding on your fears. And in microseconds, your value to the company has been slashed to ribbons. How dare they do this without consulting me? They can't play with people's lives like this. Surely they can't get away with it. You just don't do that. The body isn't even cold and they're walking away. How many more bodies will die in the process? Crisis management mode. Is the only question left, how painless will it be, or how well do I choose to die? The good news is you can take your life back from them. It now becomes a question of professional life or death. Experienced managers are able to put aside the depths of their own concerns and in an instant reaction project strength, courage and focus of purpose. It does sound like the Marines have landed. Improvise, adapt and overcome. There is a vitality in you that is unique expression of who you are. It is solely yours. Make sure you keep it clear and direct. Don't block it because it won't exist anywhere else. There is no one to blame, no body to kick or soul to be damned, but this nefarious thing called change. A constant and immutable fact, and for many our greatest fear. Create, preserve and destroy are the facets of murders and acquisitions. The quandary comes in dealing with the emotional turmoil. Chairman X could only see one face, the business, not the individual. There's no arguing if it isn't working and it's ill, then it needs an injection of new life. You don't love it anymore, so get rid of it. That's if you haven't killed it first. A practical reality, all emotion must be divorced, sad but inevitable. But it doesn't have to be that way. The sale value is in the goodwill, the relationships with the customers and the people. One clear and undoubted act must take place. Comprehensive communication ensuring humanist support. Drive cohesion and achievement. So what does the experienced manager say when the axeman stands outside the door? We do not have the choice about what the owners chose, but we do have a choice about how we deal with it. If you're only interested in yesterday, then you'll not be able to create tomorrow. You chose this as your profession, you like what you do, and enjoy your customers. So continue to demonstrate who you are. It is noticed. Don't let your customers down. Don't let your teammates down, but most of all, don't let yourself down. If you must leave, do so with a pride and professionalism that will carry you further on your journey. You cannot change the direction of the wind, but you can adjust the sails. Change cannot be ignored and tomorrow will not be like yesterday. The only course of action, although uncertain, is to create the future in the now. So in summary, Despite the attention mergers and acquisitions have received from financial and marketing strategists, the merger failure rate is still as high as it's ever been. Now, in light of the current wave of that merger activity, remember the 40,000 announced just last year alone, it would seem appropriate time to start considering alternative explanations of why they fail, and assess the contribution that psychology can actually make to both our understanding of them and addressing the essence of the activity within them, so that we have a positive combination of people and a fusion of those organisation cultures. 3 key things. Lead with trust. Engage and motivate clear, consistent, frequent comms, and keep the focus on BAU. Remember, they need to feel normal through this. Lead with influence. Must communicate with credibility and influence to all the stakeholders as a leader in the new united organisation. Leading with vision is not just setting the new long-term direction, it's also about embracing the short-term challenges so that you can capture the synergy to move to that integrated view and start achieving those new business results. That's my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. My contact details are there, and also, as I mentioned, there are a couple of extra slides after this with additional resources. There are references and other links to organisations that you will find very helpful indeed. ADCAR, there's the link there, link to Karen's book. There's the link to the Back to ITSM group, and a special thank you and call out to people like April Allen, Daniel Billing, Joshua Bruce, Karen Ferris, James Gander, Jan Houghton, Mark Kawasaki and Peter Linz. They contributed very much to those lessons learned. I will stop the presentation now, change back over to my screen.
Welcome back, Simone.
There we go. Everything worked really well.
It did. It all went without a hitch.
Excellent.
You're still sharing your screen.
Okay.
Just click the button to your right. There you are. That's better.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, so mergers and acquisitions. Now, I certainly, a few years back, had my fair share of those from the acquiring point of view. I worked for an organisation that had, I think we acquired close to 20 small companies in the space of 2 or 3 years. And we learned a lot. Yeah, we learned a lot from the first couple, but possibly, too late. I can remember one where one of the key reasons for acquiring this smaller business was the talent that they had. The business wanted to acquire that talent, but when they came on board and found out what our IT systems were, they left because no one had actually come with their requirements to IT. I mean, these were really important people they wanted to keep, but nobody had actually thought to come and talk to us. They had come from a company where they had nice, high-powered PCs of their own on their desks, and they were coming to us where we had dumb terminals and dumb terminals only. They had no individual software. They couldn't control it. And and you can imagine coming from that environment to ours, they were not happy people. But
when was the first time you actually knew about being acquired?
Well, I was on the other side of the fence, Simone. We were doing the acquiring. So, we'd obviously known for a while that this was happening in the IT department, but nobody had actually thought to go to the talent that we were acquiring at this new company and say, what are your IT requirements?
Strangely enough, though, I usually find that the CIO kind of role usually knows, but as I said, execs usually don't communicate very well. I usually find that the network or security manager often knows, because there's a lot of confidentiality that has to be kept. They usually start locking down a lot of the systems, especially because there does tend to be issues around things like sabotage, especially the passive aggressive. They're the ones that tend to know just which widget to out the server room to make everything go bung. So I usually find that those roles do sometimes know before anyone else.
Yes, yeah, they do. I mean, do you have a checklist that you would, what are the key things that you would advise people to look at when they're involved on either side of the fence? What are the key considerations?
Well, as I mentioned before, is those critical success factors. You have to know exactly what it is that you want in terms of retaining the talent. Aligning the leadership is really important. Defining the communication so that you're actually getting a consistent message across the board. I think that's really important, to have consistency within the leadership. Now, when I talk about leadership, that's, yes, you want it in the exec level, but it's the line managers that are at the face with the teams. And they have to have enough confidence to be able to keep their people focused on BAU at the same time they're having to go through this. So consistency of message is really important. Now, especially I know in some situations I haven't wanted to stay with the organisation, but it's very important to, whether you agree with the organisation or not, you still have to maintain the service for your customers, but also the service that, by signing on that dotted line, your staff are your customers as well, because as a manager you are there to support them through payroll issues, leave issues, personal issues, shift issues, all of those sorts of things, and also the skill sets and that they need. As I mentioned, when there's a lack of knowledge, as far as I'm concerned, it's like going to work naked.
Yeah.
Exposed.
Yeah, unfortunately, that happens far more often than it should. When merging two very different entities together is, the cultural differences between organisations can be huge. Even organisations that are practicing in the same industry, it's not a given that they have the same values.
Well, in that last case study, I was really happy with the original company that was acquiring us. In fact, it was much better than what we currently had. They had the most brilliant people management systems. Their whole HR was fantastic. They were coming to us to help work out the training and development and the skill sets that were required. Nobody felt uncomfortable. Nobody felt like, uh-oh, I'm going to be walked out the door because I'm redundant. There was none of that. But we were, 10 months into that first one, and we were actually applying the both strategic and operational plans. We were implementing those physically when we got acquired the next time, and that organisation turned out to be awful. It was such a trauma.
Yep. I just have a comment through Twitter here from Karen Ferris. Just a comment on the fact that the last 4 presentations we've had are all about people and how organisations and people change. None of us have been focusing on the technology side of things. So it's this industry is not technology focused. Service management is actually, it's about people, and it's about how we adapt to the changing world we live in. And the rate of change in the world that we're living in is pretty amazing. Just this particular what we're doing today. This is just so different and groundbreaking.
I can't believe that I'm actually on the other side of the world to you right now doing this.
Yeah. You couldn't really be further away, could you?
No, it'd be a bit hard, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So no, it's. We have to adapt and change every day in the work that we're doing, because if we don't, if we left the industry today and came back in a year's time, I believe we would have a huge amount of trouble adapting to the changes that we will see in the next 12 months.
I think a very common thing that occurs during these types of situations is decision paralysis. Often steps in. When you're actually in emotional turmoil like that, there's no rational thinking. A lot of that usually goes out the door, and I think that's why people focus on the legal and the financial aspects of mergers and I keep wanting to say murders because that's how it feels. But I think that's why they focus so much on the financial and legal side, because it's tick box. You know, they can hold on to it and, you know, just work their way through it. Whereas all this other emotional stuff, as I said, it's not a legal requirement to do communication strategies. And yet that's a very core part of being able to help people deal with that. A lot of them like to just hire those organisations. The professional, you can outsource, where they come in and help you do your resumes and talk people through, try and help them find other jobs, and those sorts of things. But if the manager itself, the line manager and above, if that consistency through is not there, of seeing to want to help them through this, whether it means they actually do want to leave, help them leave the right way. I mean, we have enough trouble bringing them in the right way, as Reid was saying in her presentation, you know, just doing the recruiting the right way. Well, when the whole thing about people management and talent management is not just about bringing people in, it's also helping them leave the right way. And in these sorts of circumstances, it happens in a very uncomfortable way most of the time.
Yeah. And I think that an often neglected part of the process are those exit interviews, finding out why people choose to leave. I mean, every organisation, every HR process says, yes, exit interviews are important, but how many of them take them as seriously as they should?
Most of the time it's just a tick in the box and it goes in the person's file. The person's already walked out the door and they put the file away and it gets archived. Yep. I don't think organisations take enough advantage of the information that they would find in there to help them move forward.
Okay, well, thanks so much for your time, Simone. You must be ready to lay your head down and get some sleep.
All right, thanks very much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.